All right. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn over the tables here to Shelley, if I can, and I'm going to ask her to introduce Allison, her good friend, our good friend, part of our medical advisory board. So happy to have her as a part of that. And I'm going to turn it over to you and let you just run with the conversation.
All right, thank you so much. Well, guys, I wanted to introduce one of our medical advisory board members. This is Allison Remy. She is a PA. She is a certified physician assistant with over 16 years of clinical experience, spanning multiple specialties, including adult and pediatric neurosurgery, emergency medicine, physical medicine, rehabilitation, hyperbaric medicine, and integrative functional medicine. Drawing upon her own experience with biotoxin associated illness and autoimmune disease, Allison is deeply committed to helping patients restore their health and vitality through comprehensive whole body evaluation with a personalized multi-dodal approach to care. So without further ado, we welcome Miss Allison Remy. So
Hello,
excited to have
hello.
you on.
Yeah, so excited to be on again. You know,
Yes.
I think I really enjoyed kind of our riff last time of just, answering questions. And I think tonight that's kind of what I want to open it up to is just having more of a dialogue between normie professionals and medicine, which I think is so super important. Um, moving forward and really helping people heal themselves and their homes because you can't do one without the other. And so, I think the more that we can understand about one another and how we work and how we can work together best, you can't go wrong.
No, but
I agree with that.
let me just say something. You're a very humble person. I've gotten to know you because of the people I've been referring you to. But let me say, Dr. Andrew Heyman, who I know you know, and I know you understudied, he has paid tremendous accolades to you. He said, there are very few people on the planet who understand the dynamics of this illness, this biotoxic illness, as Allison Remy. And you're very humble about this, but for those that are in attendance here tonight, you need to understand that Allison, there are very few people on the planet who understand what we're about to talk about. So don't hold back. And the reason I say that, I had a conversation with someone today in a part of the country who said, they've talked about this subject matter, that these things in a damp and water damaged building, endotoxins, actinobacteria, mycotoxins, all of which, this polymicrobial soup, becomes aerosolized. People breathe it and it drives immune system dysregulation. And he said, most of the remediators think that this is Star Trek stuff. They think it's just, voodoo science. They don't buy into it. Now consider the source. Everybody who's just been trained to look at the tip of the iceberg, right? The only observable mold in a house is the only problem you have, and it doesn't cause illness unless you scrape it up, put it in your Cheerios. So at some point in time tonight, I'm going to back away, but I wanted everybody to know we're talking to an authoritative figure here who will speak about this as long as necessary for people to understand the implications, because you see it in real world scenarios and you also lived it. So please, don't be shy. Ask Allison questions. But I'll tell you, we got a lot of educating to do, because if people are out there thinking that what you talk about, what everybody here talks about, is voodoo science, we have to overcome that lack of awareness, that resistance, and quite frankly, that ignorance.
So I have a question. I'm going to throw out the first question, if that's all right.
Go for it.
Miss Allison. So I'd like to know, kind of from your own words, why you think what we're doing in terms of connecting the built environment to the healthcare industry. I think, first of all, why that's so important from your perspective, because you've lived this. And the second thing about that is, why has it taken so long?
Huh, that's a great question. I think that's the $1 million question is why has it taken so long? Why weren't people doing this years ago? of connecting the built home to illness. And I think it was happening, but I think again, years ago when Richie Shoemaker kind of discovered this in Pocomoke, Maryland, and noticed that watermen were getting ill after being out on the waters, and then kind of slowly connected the dots that Pfiesteria was the kind of causative organism. That was the first kind of iteration of SIRS. And then he was able to extend it out of, other organisms and biotoxins that cause this just chronic inflammatory response. And so I think, like Skip said, it's been kind of considered fringe medicine or, voodoo science for so long. But I mean, if you look at the National Institute of Health website, they just now updated it in April that, that mold and biotoxins aren't just an allergen or an irritant. They actually activate the innate immune system. I mean, if you look at one of the studies that the NIEHS kind of bookmarked on there or linked to, it was a study using Stachybotrys spores that were administered to mice nasally. And it was full strength spores and then spores that had been denatured. Both of them were still causing an innate immune response in the mice. So, I mean, if that doesn't prove that right there, I thought that was a huge thing with that study being on the NIEHS. And I actually shared it with a lawyer that's active in mold litigation, Kevin Terrazas. I had referred him some patients and, was asking kind of what's the state of the union from a litigation standpoint. And of course, this chronic inflammatory response, it flies in some states, it doesn't in others, but I think that will change over time. It's slow. I mean, Shelley knows this. She was the landmark case, and that was what, how many years ago? 2010?
Yeah.
And here it is, 2025. And, it's still kind of slow to populate. So I think as more research comes out, and now that the National Institute of Health is actually saying, yeah, this does more things than we thought. It's not just an allergen, it's not an irritant, it's causing neurological problems, it's causing immune system problems, it's causing problems throughout the body. I mean, there's not one system that goes untouched. I think that will slowly expand this out, and it will slowly get to mainstream medicine. Traditional allopathic medicine is slow on the uptake. This isn't being taught in medical schools. This is something that is learned after, physicians, nurse practitioners, PAs, after we all get out of school. This is, additional kind of on the job stuff where you have to go and seek it out and learn. So I think that will slowly change, and it is slowly changing. I mean, we don't even have a diagnosis code for this chronic inflammatory response syndrome yet. We still have to kind of piecemeal those together, and I think that's also a reason why insurance isn't covering this. And so, yeah, I think we've got a good start, but we've still got way longer to go. But I mean, I just can't. I can't. It's just, it's so important for people to realize that their homes are making them sick. I just don't know what else, apart from screaming at the rooftops, how important this is. And the more remediators and microbial inspectors that, that we can educate, I think the better, because y'all are truly the front lines in this.
Well,
You're
well,
the ones who come into contact. You're the first professional that a lot of folks come into contact with, and that's also a make it or break it, because if you're someone who doesn't know what they're doing and you make that person sicker, their impression moving forward of environmental professionals is skewed. And so I think that's why it's so important for us to connect patients with trained professionals to really kind of, let them know they're not only in a safe place with us as medical practitioners, but they're in a safe place with their environmental professionals too.
One of the real exciting things about this, and I've not really said this out loud lately to anyone, but one of the exciting things to me about this, being able to collect this data, and we've talked about how it will change the industry, the assessment industry, remediation industry, how it will change the medical industry and the way they see patients, et cetera, et cetera. What we haven't talked about, but really excites me, I hope I live long enough to see this, is I would love for this data and research, which will be, uh, you won't be able to ignore it, to be able to impact the building industry. I want builders to start figuring out that they're part of the problem. We
Yes.
actually create some of the issues, and I don't think they're going to listen until we've got the kind of information that we're going to be able to get with your help, and Dr. Heyman's help. And then we start drawing some conclusions about the built environment and the outcomes and positive outcomes that we can finally, I mean, I'm ready to go to the National Association of Home Builders and say, hey, don't you realize what you're doing? You're the one that's creating this problem. In a lot of cases, you're the one, because of your minimum standards and because of your lack of interest in indoor air quality. Do you know that you can build a LEEDS program and they don't even talk about indoor air quality?
Hmm.
I mean, what in the world is that all about? So anyway, thank you so much for what you're doing. I do have another question, but I don't want to hog the night. Hey, Michael, how you doing?
Hi, Doug. Thanks. I wasn't planning on being a panelist, so I'm a little bit
Well,
casual tonight, but thank you for elevating my status, so to speak.
oh yeah, well, I wanted them to see your face. And you had a question. Did you want to ask that question?
Yeah, I should have just sent it in anonymously because I'm wearing I'm an Italian t-shirt, so
No, that's the best part of seeing you tonight.
I guess the bottom part says you couldn't handle me even with instructions, but sorry about that. But the fact of the matter is, um, I'm more familiar with Allison. Thank you for being here. First of all, I've heard a lot about you. I've listened to you multiple times. And I'm much more familiar with what's going on the NORMI side, on the remediator side, how the NORMI Pro management is trying to bring more professionals to the table to help with the environmental side. I also know a little bit about what Dr. Heyman's trying to do and the website that's coming forward. But two things, it's a two-part question. One is, how do we get more doctors in a general sense to understand that this is important and want to learn about it? And then the second part is even more granular and actually more important to me. I've got a lot of clients that I deal with. I cannot find a physician or a PA or somebody in the medical profession in their area that is really knowledgeable about this. And so it's hard for me to guide those clients when I don't have a source on the medical side. So I just wondered, is there some trick that you've got, so to speak, in terms of how to identify those sorts of medical professionals?
Sure. I think with regards to identifying a medical professional, I think a lot of it is just going to be one, having a conversation with them and see how they view. And I think you just kind of, it's almost like interviewing or dating. You have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find a prince. You can always go on to the Shoemaker, the Proficiency Partners website, and they have a list of physicians and other medical providers that have taken the training and have come through. So essentially what that means is they've taken a test, they've passed the test, and they're called a Shoemaker Proficiency Partner. Now, are they following the tenets of the protocol to really get people treated and to move through the protocol correctly? That's where things start to go off the rails a little bit, and where not all practitioners are created equally. Just the fact, like not all remediators, microbial assessors, not all are created equally. So I think a lot of it is just interviewing and having a conversation with them and saying, hey, look, I'm a part of NORMI, and, we have this protocol, and, just kind of seeing what their answers are. I mean, I know that's not a great answer. I wish there was a more reliable way to hook NORMI professionals up with medical professionals that are appropriately trained. And I know Dr. Heyman is trying to fix that issue as well. And I think one of the ways is that moving forward on the Beyond Mold website that's going to be coming up, there's not only going to be training for environmental professionals, but for medical professionals as well, where they can go on and get trained and get certified. And like I said, a lot of it is just the patient and or the NORMI professional meeting with the medical practitioner and having a consultation. I mean, I do it in our practice, whenever I onboard a potential new chronic inflammatory response syndrome patient, I do a 15-minute free consult. So, I mean, anyone can book this consult, and, we kind of talk about where each of us is coming from, like where that person is in their journey. I always like to, tell them a little bit about what our treatment approach is, and because there's a bunch of different protocols out there as well, a bunch of different medical camps, so to speak, of how they feel mold should be treated. And like I said, it's not all created equally, but having a conversation with someone, I think, goes a long way to say, hey, does this kind of align with, how we are working from the NORMI standpoint with the medical advisory board? Do the way they treat patients align with the way that we see the built residence and how it can impact health? And does the practitioner recognize that as well?
So if I can just follow up, I will tell you that there's a great need for that, obviously. Several of my clients, and of course, I've got a bit of a national clientele. So I'm trying to match people up in different parts of the country with medical providers and with individuals that can do the work and assessors and all of that. And I will tell you that more than a few times, even using the Shoemaker list of doctors and stuff, they're not taking any more patients, just flat out. They're full, and I appreciate that, because I wouldn't want a doctor, taking somebody and then not being able to give them the service that they need. But it's just really frustrating because I'm doing my best. I'm trying to guide them. And as I said, I'm guiding them long distance and trying to provide them with these resources. And they're just frustrated. They're frustrated that no one knew what was going on to begin with. They now think that they got some answers in terms of what's going on. And now the frustrations continue again, because even the doctors that seem to know what's going on can't take them as a patient, or the assessors, are too far away, or, I mean, it's heartbreaking, quite honestly.
It really is heartbreaking. I mean, and, I say that because, Dr. Heyman is actually in the process of retiring, but he can't be in so many places now, but, he can help the greater good through this Beyond Mold website. So I think that's going to be a huge draw for people, is that once this goes live, it's going to enable them to at least start the process from a DIY standpoint. So it's going to guide them on the basic tenets of the Shoemaker protocol, how they can not only test their home, but also test themselves medically, and kind of get the ball rolling. And, kind of from anecdotally, from just me practicing and treating all these SIRS patients, I think there's a large majority of folks that, if they're going to go through the website and kind of do DIY, a lot of them will be able to clean themselves up on their own by doing the binder and following the steps, and should get better. Now, there's a small percentage who they're probably going to do that and they're not going to feel better. And then that's where they need to find a practitioner. And so I know that our clinic can help out. We do have our medical director who's licensed in all 50 states. I'm not licensed in all 50 states, but we have practitioners that can see patients in all 50 states that are mold literate, and so we are taking those patients on. So if anyone has an immediate need, or a really sick individual they need to send, I'm happy to. We're happy to take them on at Laval Performance, because we're still accepting patients actively. So, I offer that, but I think the Beyond Mold website is going to be huge for at least getting people started on their own. It's going to be much more cost effective and accessible as well. So it's not going to cost folks an arm and a leg to start treatment.
Well, thank you. So if you have some availability and some, like you said, reach across the nation, I'm assuming that Shelley or Skip or Doug or somebody has that sort of contact information that they can get out to the group tonight, maybe as a follow-up email, because I'll tell you what, just being able to give that information to some of my clients would be huge. It's just, like I said, it's terribly frustrating. And 2 years from now, we're going to be in a lot different situation. We're going to have more assessors. We're going to have more doctors. I mean, I'm sure that this thing is going to just explode. But right now, it's just growing pains.
It is. And, quite honestly, too, there's a lot of practitioners that are interested in learning more. And, it's just finding the training program. So that's why I can't wait for Dr. Heyman to come out with a training program from George Washington, where, providers can not only get continuing education, but they get the full training and they get to work, kind of on their own time frame. Of moving through all the information. So I think that Beyond Mold website and the GW programs are just going to be huge moving forward for not only medical professionals, but the lay person and the environmental professionals.
Allison, we have a couple of questions tonight from the panel. Reese Howe says, we've had several projects with high endotoxins, but great HERTSMI numbers. Do you think this is common? Would beta glucans possibly be high in that environment as well? Are there extra steps to prevent endotoxins bacteria amplification, or are they the same as a preventative for mold?
So I would say endotoxins are just as problematic as mold, mycotoxins, actinobacteria. It depends on the person. Now we do have we have a test that we can do. It's called a transcriptomics test. It's called Genie. And what it does is it basically looks at what genes are being expressed at that time, what genes are kind of popping off. And we can see like specific immune reactivity patterns in the genes to mold and mycotoxins, to actinobacteria, to endotoxins. And that's really helpful when we've got a patient. And I can think of a patient I'm working with currently who her, NORMI, HERTSMI too, weren't horrible. I mean, it looked pretty good. I mean, I've seen worse, but she's still sick. And we did a Genie, and she didn't, none of that information, she didn't have any specific immune reactivity patterns for any of those. So those hadn't kind of popped off yet. So we really are working through kind of addressing, endotoxins, actinobacteria, ventilation in the home, I think has been problematic. So I think that's something definitely to address from an endotoxin standpoint is ventilation. I mean, Doug and Skip, you can probably speak to that a little bit more on, different things that you can do to improve that. But I think ventilation is going to be huge, and I think it's underutilized too.
I agree.
Well,
Okay.
The key point there is that it's not just a mold problem.
That's right.
Exactly.
And this is the fascinating thing for me, is that when you look at transcriptomics and genomics, you can zero right in. This is not a mold. This is not driving immune dysregulation here. This is not this. This is not this. This is an endotoxin. I mean, for people who are naysayers out there that say this is Star Trek stuff, this is a sci-fi movie, it's not. And the things that you're talking about are so relevant that the public, many of the public understand this more so than anybody in the environmental arena. Because we get these phone calls. That's why I refer people to you, Allison, right? Something's not right. And yet most people in the remediation industry, which is a standalone because we're not talking the same thing when we're talking about biotoxicity profiles being reversed in an environment. But this is the fascinating aspect of what we're teaching and what we know about what goes on in the built environment.
And I want to underscore that on the sanitization protocol, because we've said from the very beginning, there's no silver bullet to cleaning up the environment. It's a holistic approach. We've got a multifaceted problem, which needs a multi-strategic approach. And so that's what our sanitization protocol is all about, is dealing with both the surfaces and the air, and not only cleaning them, but then putting in place good air purification technologies, good passive technologies, good maintenance, scheduled maintenance, people keeping things clean. All of that is really kind of a holistic approach to making sure that the environment is clean. And then, of course, it's proved by testing. I mean, that's like a no-brainer. So yeah, it's just you've got to think about it from a holistic standpoint on the built environment.
Mm-hmm.
Allison, we talked about this earlier. It seems like that mycotoxins are kind of a hot button right now. I want to talk about different testing as far as mycotoxin testing through the urine and through the body. And can you show me how using that different testing, what that looks like as far as real-time numbers in a patient?
So the urinary mycotoxin testing, everyone who comes to us, or they'll say, hey, I think I've got mold in my home, or I've got a problem, and I've got this urinary mycotoxin test that I took that's through the roof on all these things, and it doesn't give you a complete picture. So the urinary mycotoxin testing is not a complete picture. The blood testing is not a complete picture. So with regards to the urinary mycotoxin, I don't use it. Now, I will tell you, give you this caveat. I have had to order it in the last 2 weeks on 2 people because of a potential litigation case. I'm not using it to treat, but the lawyer that is their chief counsel wanted it to have just in case. Just because, SIRS is not it doesn't have this ICD-10 code, so he can't argue the SIRS diagnosis in every state, so he still has to use this urinary mycotoxin and the blood mycotoxin testing. So that's purely dependent on the state, and litigation is an entirely different bird. But with regards to the urinary mycotoxin, I don't use it basically because that test was debunked probably back in 2018, 2019. That test was originally developed for use in third world countries to assess what kind of mold burden people were ingesting in the food in third world countries. So that's why that test was developed. It was never meant to be deployed in a first world country. And so, people will tell me, oh, well, look, I've got this high mycotoxins in my urine. And I'll just say, well, I understand that, but realize that's only what you're ingesting is what we're seeing. And so, that's where, again, it's not a complete picture. And, the blood testing, like the MyMyco Labs that does the, the IgG, IgE, all that's proving is that your body is having an immune response to certain mycotoxins, but it's still not giving you a complete picture because that's going more off the premise that mold is more of an allergen or an irritant. And so that's all that blood test is proving, is that someone can have an immune system reaction to that. So again, it's just not a complete picture of what's going on in a person's body. And that's why I think the Shoemaker protocol really shines, because we're looking at the innate immune system labs to prove that dysregulation. And we also see that change as we treat the illness over time.
You know, Allison,
Great.
one of the things that I wish that we could in some way communicate to our members that this um, landscape that we're working in is changing every single day. Um, yeah, maybe 3 years ago, 6 years ago, whenever it was, you know, urine testing happened to be the thing, but that's not where we are today. And
Exactly.
I kind of liken it to our electronics technology. We just recently shot a video. I was going to get some raw footage. Asked the guy, you know, how could I get that raw footage, thinking he would just load it up to a website. He said, well, just send me a USB, just a 1 terabyte USB. I said, a 1 terabyte USB? I didn't even know they made them. And sure enough, I got this little 1 terabyte USB, stuck it in the mail today. Uh, it's just our technology, just like that. I think our technology and the way we're seeing this industry, we're working like crazy to stay on top of this. And I know you are as well. And
Mhm.
I think that that's a huge benefit for our members. And I just wish they could understand how important it is that they really stay current with this information.
This is changing at lightning speed. I mean, if you think about it, um, in the last 5 years, there has been so much new information that has come out with regards to transcriptomics, with regards to NeuroQuant, and looking at the MRI of the brain for the volumetric changes that biotoxins can cause in the brain. This is an ever evolving thing, and I think, and that's why I love NORMI so much, is because you have the continuing education for all the professionals to keep up on. And I think that's who's really going to shine moving forward, is those people who are staying on top and aren't, still living 5 years ago and using the data 5 years ago. Because I think that's the problem with medicine too, is that you have, even some of the Shoemaker trained medical practitioners, maybe they were trained 5 or 6 or 7 plus years ago, and they're still, if they haven't gone through an update and followed what's going on and what's new, they're still operating with, a prior operating system, so to speak. It's like
It's time
having
for an
your
upgrade.
computer. Yeah, exactly. It's
Mhm.
time for an upgrade. And so I
Mhm.
think that's true not only in the medical world, but also in the environmental professional world too, is that people are still, operating off the IICRC stuff. And I mean, Normie has surpassed that with the NCRSI.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Someone
So
just asked, where can they get a copy of the Shoemaker Protocol?
So you can get a copy of kind of the basic tenets of the Shoemaker protocol from survivingmold.com. But I tell you what I can do is probably put something together that just gives a bit, a handout that you could give to patients, or you could just keep on hand for reference as an environmental professional. So I think we could probably just make a handout that kind of has the major steps of the Shoemaker protocol, because that's evolving too, quite honestly. We don't, in talking with Dr. Heyman recently, um, all of this data that he's collected over the years has really led him to be able to kind of refine the Shoemaker protocol, with the blessing of Richie Shoemaker, and that, it doesn't have to be this entire 12-step protocol anymore. There are certain things that we know are going to correct with the last step of the protocol, which is using the vasoactive intestinal peptide, the VIP. And so there's a number, there's a few labs that we don't necessarily have to draw anymore because we know it's going to get corrected with VIP. So if it's not a litigation case, I'm kind of moving that way too, where we're able to save the patient some money and, all of these things that we know are off that correct with VIP, we'll test that in the end, but we know we don't necessarily have to do that to begin with.
Michael, I think you had a question.
Yeah, well, actually, it was just a follow-up to the earlier discussion about, new information coming every day and trying to keep up with it and everything. And I absolutely agree with that. But I also want to point out that it is the information that's coming out in many respects is support for information that was available for people to look at and draw conclusions from 20 and 25 years ago. And the idea that somehow that mold causes neurological problems is, some new, discovery or something like that. There was, medical tests and things I was reading about as early as 2001 that was talking about brain deficiencies from people having, and animal studies and things. And so for me, it's individuals have to piece some of this together, or have been piecing some of this together. And every once in a while in our society, those things come together and it hits that tipping point. And now we're, experiencing that rapid acceleration in terms of people, and then all the ideas coming forward, all the new information and the support. But most of the core ideas, in my humble opinion, at least on the environmental side, and many that I saw on the medical side, have been ideas that people have been promoting and being called wackos for 25 years.
Well, and I think that's part of it, is that, people attributed all of that, back in 2001 and kind of before, they attributed it as wacko fringe medicine, and they just kind of poo-pooed it. And it wasn't until you have other people not affiliated with Richie Shoemaker at major medical centers and universities who are doing this research now, and it's confirming it. So I think that's part of it too, is that, oh, well, okay, someone else other than Richie Shoemaker said it and did the study, like the one that was linked in the NIEHS about, giving the rats nasal stachybotrys, both, kind of untouched and then denatured stachybotrys, and what those results were. I mean, Shoemaker could have told you that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but no one believed him until someone not affiliated with Shoemaker does a study, and lo and behold, you find the same thing.
I think litigation has also helped to kind of quantify what is happening, because it kind of takes it out of the realm of just medicine, right? It is merging the world of litigation with medicine to show a causal effect to why the plaintiff is so ill. And just to see all of those different things kind of fall into alignment, I think is how we're able to kind of get the message out that this isn't fake, this is real. And we have methods and modalities and ways to treat and prove, right, exactly what is happening to you. I mean, literally on like a molecular level. And I think that's the cool part of all of this, is being able to, it's not just about, for me, I didn't just prove it in court, right? It is showing through my blood, right? Showing through my biomarkers, looking at my IgGs, my IgEs, other things that are happening in my body, right? In addition to what is happening in my brain. And I just think there's so many people out there that are just begging, crying for help, right? And I think the gaslighting is a big thing in the medical industry. And those are things that we're slowly starting to overcome. I am so excited to know that Dr. Heyman is about to start teaching these CE classes to physicians. I think that is a great way to onboard a lot of physicians that are in the space. I really think that if something just as simple as when you go into your general practice doctor and you have a certain subset of symptoms, whether that be allergies, congestion, upper respiratory, sinusitis, the next question should be, what does your living environment look like? Have you had a problem with water leaks? Have you noticed any moisture in your home? Do you have mold? Because you would be surprised how many people are not making the causal link from A to B. And I love that NORMI is able to kind of fill in the gap with that. But could you talk a little bit more about that and kind of what that looks like as far as coming full circle?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of coming full circle, I mean, I think this has just been it's been a process. I mean, just kind of like what I discussed earlier, where people are slowly learning. And I think primary care physicians who are kind of, I equate them to as the frontline providers too, who are running into more people. And I think the more that they run into patients that are saying, hey, you know what, I've got this subset of symptoms where I feel horrible. And, letting them know that the house is essentially or should be their environment, a patient's environment should be like the fifth vital sign. I love I take that from Dr. Heyman. I can't take credit for that. That was Dr. Heyman that mentioned that the environment has to be the fifth vital sign. And once practitioners start doing that, I think this is where it's going to evolve. And I think some people are. And so then it's a matter of pointing them in the right direction of getting the information that they need to be able to properly evaluate and treat their patient. And I think that's where there's kind of a disconnect too, because there's so many different camps out there that, have taken from the Shoemaker protocol, but then they've twisted it into something else. And so you have these offshoots in medicine that are going everywhere, and, telling people to do things, but they don't have the evidence-based data to say that this works. It's all anecdotal. If you look at the Neil Nathans of the world, the Jill Carnahans, the Andrew Campbells, where they take things from the Shoemaker protocol and then they kind of go off on their own path and do their own thing, all of that is anecdotal. The only evidence-based protocol is the Shoemaker protocol. I mean, and that was even from a literature review as of 2024, so last year, that no one else had any of this evidence base. So I think it's going to come full circle when more practitioners start to ask about that fifth vital sign of a patient's environment. And the more that they start to ask about that, I think the more they're going to see that this is a big problem and that it's going undiagnosed and unnoticed. And a lot of these folks with super chronic, weird symptoms are being marginalized. They're being told they're crazy, or it's all in their head, or they're being told by their family members, it's all in your head because I'm not sick, you are. So, it can't be the house if I'm not sick.
Yeah, I think that's a very sad part of this.
Shelley, I saw a question pop up here. I want to address it in 30 seconds.
Sure.
Somebody popped up, but how important is, cleaning of an environment? Well, Allison, by virtue of the NIH reference study with the denatured and viable mold causing driving the immune dysregulation, this is why this is so critical. These companies out there that say, we're going to spray this chemical and you're going to be fine. We're going to spray this or fog that and you're going to be fine. A denatured microbial is no longer capable of respiration, but it is still capable of driving immune dysregulation. Fine particle cleaning. Let's remember, the things that we have to physically remove from that environment are 20 times smaller than a single grain of talcum powder. And if it's aerosolized and someone inhales it, it still is representative of the inflammatory response to that occupant. You can't do that. And so this has been covered.
Preach,
Please
preach, preach,
cover that, please.
preach.
Well, and that's why I think it's going to be exciting for us to talk about dielectric barrier ionizers next week and how it gets all those fine particles out of the air that won't get trapped in a filter. So that's going to be yeah.
I was bummed that I didn't get to watch. I missed the CPI presentation. Do you
Well,
know
we got
that speaks to my heart.
well, we got it recorded
So do
just
the
for you.
dielectric ionizers.
We got CPI recorded just for you. So I can send you a link. Listen, guys, I want to thank you so much for being here tonight, Allison. We're going to invite you again. This is right at the top of the hour. So
I love this. The more that we can have just this open dialogue of ask the questions,
yeah,
and the more that we can get medical providers involved in this to kind of just sit and have these round tables and to connect and to talk about, all of these different issues and, talk about scenarios. I love it.
well, we're going to do it again. And so we're going to wear you out. Just plan on that.
Bring it on. Bring it on.
I'm so excited. Well, let me share with everybody one thing before we go tonight, because Skip, you haven't seen this. Shelley, you haven't seen this. Michael, Allison, you haven't seen this, but I think you'll be excited when you do. This is the NORMI Pro Management website. Everybody can see that, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you scroll down now, again, notice if you can send your clients here, they can click on mold illness and it'll take them right straight to the interview questionnaire so that they can be connected with an intake specialist. So this is really important for you to know. But I want to show you what we did, which is really cool. Scroll down here to the middle. You're going to find the NORMI Pro Management Team Medical Advisory Board right here. When you click on that, there they are, all 6 of them with their bios.
Yahoo!
Yeah. And so all you need to do is just click on their bio and that'll come right up. You want to know who they are, this is the way you find them out. And there's our Miss Allison right there. So great to have her on board.
Oh, such a joy, so facilitative. So Allison,
Absolutely.
I can't thank you enough for what you represent to us, for what you represent to the world. Thank you for doing what you do.
Amen.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Have a great evening. NORMI members, see you next Tuesday for sure.
Thank you, everyone.